against you. Um, no problem. Stuff happens. We keep it moving. So I forget where we were, but I'll let you re-ask or pose a new question, Aaron.
Yeah. Wow. Never happened before in this meetup before. Something like that happened. So let me ask you this. Your first deal being a GP, how did that come about?
Yeah, so as I tell folks, I'm not an example of an overnight success because it took me the better part of 2 years of pursuit before I landed my first large deal. Obviously, as I mentioned, I had smaller multifamily deals for many years, but large scale multifamily, it took me the better part of 2 years, including kind of a dormant period of COVID before I landed it. So my first deal got awarded back in the summer of 21, closed on that deal, a 244 unit here in Metro Atlanta that we acquired for just under 30 million. And that was a publicly marketed deal that came to me via a broker that we underwrote and competed against a number of folks and went through the rounds of kind of best and final to buyer interview, and ultimately we were able to be awarded that deal.
Cool, I love it.
There's lots that went into it to be in a position to get the deal, but that's kind of the quick version. But I can go into as much detail as you want.
Yeah, if you could, just a little bit more. Yeah, just so everybody understands a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, so that the property, the early 70s vintage property, like I mentioned, 244 units. I happen to know the sellers of the property, but I don't know that knowing the sellers gave me any kind of unfair advantage in pursuing the property. As you know and might expect, Aaron, at the end of the day, cash is king. So unless you've got the funds and the credibility and all of that stuff to convince them that they should be doing business with you, one of the understandings that I came to, one of the differences in doing kind of smaller multifamily or single family acquisitions is you think that having the money or being able to demonstrate you have the money should get you a deal. But what you realize when you're pursuing large scale multifamily is that that's a prerequisite, but by no means is that sufficient by itself. So you've basically got to convince the broker first that you're credible. And so I don't know if you or your audience is familiar with the law of the first deal. I know Michael Blanc talks about it, others talk about it, but the hardest deal that you will ever do in the large scale multifamily space is that first deal. So going from 0 to 1 is the hardest deal to do. My second deal, we got awarded within a week of closing that first one. So there's a lot of effort that goes into it. And part of it is breaking into what I call a country club, because in many respects, it's a country club where there's a price of admission. You kind of got to talk the talk. You've got to kind of convince them that where the forks and spoons and knives go. You're not going to embarrass them. And so there's a breaking in kind of an entry period where you are effectively trying to convince the brokers or the broker community that you are not just a tire kicker. And if you get a deal awarded to you, you are going to be able to close that deal.
Right.
The last thing any broker wants to have happen to them is that they recommend you to the seller, their client, and for whatever reason, the deal blows up and you are unable to close the deal, because that's going to be egg on their face and they've got a reputation that they've got to worry about. So brokers will spend a lot of their time trying to weed you out and determine and assess whether or not you're legitimate. So if you know that they're trying to do that, you've got to figure out what are the things that I can be doing that are going to position me, despite my lack of experience at this level of play, what are the things that I can be doing that are going to help me be more convincing, more persuasive in terms of me demonstrating or evidencing my ability to close on this deal. So for me, I had never done a deal. I had never done a deal of 30 million. I had never raised 8.25 million of equity. The biggest thing that I had purchased in terms of real estate was a 5-unit, outside of my personal residence, was a 5-unit multifamily. So going from 5 units to 244 is a leap of faith on a number of levels. And so that's not going to impress a broker. Even the fact that I had invested in probably upwards of 2,000 doors across the country and 300 plus hotel keys, none of that meant much to the broker community, because at the end of the day, they want to know, have you closed a deal similar to the type of deal that you want me to award to you? Or you want the seller to award to you based on my recommendation. So some of the things that you can do, what I did was I surrounded myself with a team of individuals who had experience in doing deals of this type, doing syndications, because that's another unknown, because you're competing against folks who are potentially pursuing these opportunities with cash in hand or cash on deck, as opposed to funds that have to go out and be raised, which is what you're doing when you're engaging in syndications, which is the business model that I've used for the 2 acquisitions that I've done. So the advice that I would give is you've got to surround yourself with teams, with individuals with whom you have some level of compatibility. I caution people that one, this is not an individual sport. This isn't tennis. This is a team sport. And you only win these opportunities and take down these deals with a team. And I don't care I don't care how much money you have. You would be silly, even if you had all of the money you need in your bank account. No one goes out and buys these deals by themselves with their own money. So you're going to be raising capital, and you're going to be assembling a team around you of individuals with different complement of skills that they bring to the table that are needed to take these types of deals down. So, I have 3 to 4 partners on each of these deals, and each of them have done probably a half a dozen deals prior to me doing this deal in November. And so part of the credibility that you try and share with the brokerage community is not just what have I done personally, but what has my team done collectively. And one of the things that they're going to be wondering is, can he raise 8 million? Can he raise 13 million? And so you want to disabuse them of any kind of concerns they may have about who is this person and can they raise the money that needs to be raised? Because if they don't raise it, again, that's egg on their face. The deal blows up, and that may lead to them losing business or credibility with their client, who's the seller.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with you. One more question for open for the attendees. Where are you going at in the future? What is your future plans in real estate?
Yeah, so I'll just look at 2022 because I don't look too far out. But coming into 2022, I said that I want to do 4 deals this year. So basically at a cadence of 1 a quarter. So I've closed 1 in February. So Q1 is taken care of. I'd like to close 3 more. It's an ambitious goal, especially in a competitive market, but I'm a believer that if you don't have ambitious goals, you're just wasting time. So that's the goal, and we'll see if we're able to hit that for 2022. And then at some point, to be determined, I anticipate I'll be branching off into development alongside the multifamily. I kind of want to get a foundation of multifamily deals in a portfolio under my belt before I veer off and get into the world of development, which is really a long game by all respects, because one project can from start to finish can be a 2+ year timeline when you're talking about development. So absolutely, that's kind of the shorter term plans, and development is probably not too far behind.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So please raise your hand and ask Clyde a question. I know Miss James, I saw your questions in the chat. So if you want to ask them, the floor is yours to ask.
Yeah, I'm not checking chat, so feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question and we can engage.
Thanks. Hey, Clive.
Hey, how you doing, Cayenne?
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you. It's so great to have you on here and to hear you speak. One of the questions that I had, by the way, we will be having another conversation soon, but one of the questions that I had, because Aaron asked you already in terms of your syndication opportunity, I wanted to know, how did you become accredited? Because I know it's accredited and sophisticated. How did the accredited come about for you? And the second question was, what is one move that you would say that you've made that was a major catapult for where you are today? I feel like you've answered that already. I don't know if you have another one, but those are my two questions: the accredited and one move that you would say that you made from 2017, 2019 to now that you believe has launched you where you are.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. So the first one is easy. So there are probably two primary ways that you can satisfy the accredited investor requirements. One is you have $1 million net worth, excluding your personal residence. The other is if you're an individual that you've made 200,000 or more in the prior 2 years, with a reasonable expectation of making that or greater in the current year. If you're a couple, the threshold goes up to 300,000. So those are the two primary ways. There are also some licensures that you can, I think it's Series 65. There's several licenses that you can, if you have those licenses, that you can qualify. There's also some movement in the accredited investor space, and there's some discussions. I think the SEC has put out for comment some proposed changes. So, we're all staying tuned for that. There's some talk of that threshold being raised. I don't think it's going to end up as high as I've heard, and it's probably going to, I would not be surprised if they move it to 3 million. But that's a whole discussion for perhaps another day. But those are the two primary ways that you can make it. So it's not anything that I actively sought out to do. It's kind of, where I was blessed to be kind of at the time that I started to move in this direction. And then the other question, I kind of touched on it earlier when I talked about kind of taking the leap of faith and getting outside of your comfort zone. And I would say that the earlier that you can take that leap of faith, the better. And the one thing is, I look back and reflect on my corporate life, I wish I had done, and I'm not a big kind of regrets type of person, because everything that I've done has put me in the seat that I'm in today. But I wish that I had not kind of bought into the idea that, I'm a corporate employee, I'm very busy, I really don't have the time to attend real estate conferences or to kind of delve into this area of interest alongside a very demanding job. Because I look back and I reflect and I say that some of the things that I started to do once I left corporate life, I could have been doing, maybe not to the same extent or at the same level, but I could have been doing some of that education certainly much earlier. I could have been investing passively as a limited partner investor in opportunities much earlier. I didn't need to wait until I stepped away from corporate life necessarily. But it's really just taking action. And the biggest aha that you've got to come to is that, okay, if I want results that are different than pretty much everyone else, what am I going to be doing that is different from pretty much everyone else? And so I made mention earlier of, the government allows you to put away 20,000 a year or whatever the threshold is these days. And and pretty much people are doing that. They'll max out to whatever that max is, but very few of them are investing beyond that $20,000. And again, if the goal is to create generational wealth, very few people will accomplish that through high income and putting aside $20,000 a year. Hopefully that answers your question, Kyan.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Phoenicia has her hand up, it looks like. So just dive in, Phoenicia.
Yes, how are you, Clive? Thank you so much for your information and the presentation. I have two questions. My first question is in regards to you saying that you have a team that you work with when you go in on these deals. How do you, or what is, I guess, the criteria that you use personally to, like, decide what team members you want to have on your team? Is it, everybody has their strong suits? Are they all like of course they would be in the same field, but have you previously done deals with them, or did you meet them somewhere, or you maybe, like it's somebody that you saw that they had knowledge in the area? And then my second question is, and I don't know if you had spoken on this earlier, in regards to funding for your, when you started, how did you get the funding? Because not everybody has, just money sitting around to get going, but I know there's different programs and just different ways for funding.
Yeah, so thanks for the questions. So the first part is that there are a few more important decisions than who you decide to partner up and go into business with. So when you're buying these types of assets, you are effectively buying a business and owning and operating a business. And so I tell people that these are marriages. So for me, our typical hold period is 3 to 5 years is what we tell our investors. We're gonna invest in this, and it's gonna be a 3 to 5 year hold. So you don't want to be in business with someone unless you know that there's an alignment of values, that like, and trust them. Because nothing really shows someone's true colors more than money. So if you want to know someone's true colors, you just put money into the mix, and that's how you're going to get real clear on what do they value, what is, how do they approach risk, what does communication look like in times of stress, in times of volatility. All of that is going to be exposed when money's on the table. So I was blessed in that those 2 years that I mentioned that it took to land my first deal, I had one primary partner who I had, we had kind of connected and had a mutual kind of connection. And he was a more experienced syndicator. He'd done 6 or 7 deals. And he said, hey, Clive, you're there in the market. You've got boots on the ground in Atlanta. To the extent that you find an opportunity, if you're looking for a partner, I'd be glad to partner with you, provided that it's not in conflict with anything that I'm doing on a similar timeline. So I always had to have kind of a plan B partner and a plan C. And right, even to this day, I have probably a half a dozen people who I would potentially look to if any of my current partners couldn't come on board with me for an opportunity that I wanted to pursue. But you get to know, again, some of those things that I mentioned. Is there an alignment of values? Just risk tolerance. So if there's a misalignment in terms of if I'm willing to take on a lot of risk and my partner is risk averse, that has the potential for a lot of friction. So those are some of the things that you want to look at before you say, I'm going to go do a deal. I'm going to go buy a business with this person. So that's what I mean when I say it's a 3 to 5 year marriage. And if you don't want to get into bed with anyone and then be surprised in the morning. So that's part of your due diligence in terms of figuring out, is there a compatibility? For me, I found my partners in a mentoring program. All my partners came out of that mentoring program, which was one of the benefits of being in a mentoring program. Beyond the education, I was looking for potential partners who I could do business with, and also prospective investors who potentially would get to know, like, and trust me, and potentially invest in opportunities that I would bring to them. So those were some of the factors beyond kind of what's the education that they have to offer? Because there's really, no one has a monopoly on the education of what it takes to go buy these large-scale multifamily communities. Every month, there's a new mastermind or mentor popping up, so-called expert who will tell you that, pay me this and I can teach you how to go buy a 100-unit multifamily. So for me, the relationships, I keep emphasizing the relationships in this business are key. So hopefully that answers the first question. Refresh me on the second question real quick.
And then the second question was in regards to funding.
Yeah, so funding. So again, I don't know of anyone who buys these deals with their own money. So I don't believe in you can do these deals with no money out of pocket or with no money down, or none of that stuff that you hear in late night TV commercials. None of that applies to large scale multifamily. When you're buying these properties, and I was just having a conversation before I got into this meeting, there's some rules of thumbs or things that you need to know. So if you're going to go buy a deal, and let's say that the purchase price is $10 million, you're going to get a loan of $6.5 million, which means you need to bring $3.5 million to the table. So one, you've got to bring $3.5 million to the table. And so syndication is the way that I and many others approach it. And your lender most likely is going to require you to have skin in the game, which means that, let's say you've got to bring $3.5 million to the table. They may say, Clive, you and your partner need to put up $350,000 of the $3.5 million. So you need to put up 10% of the total equity you need to bring to the table. So I'm just using this as just raw numbers. Additionally, you need to be aware of the fact that for that $6.5 million that you're going to borrow, you need to be prepared. And when I say you, I mean your team needs to be prepared to bring a net worth in aggregate. Let's say that there are 4 partners. The 4 of you collectively need to have a net worth of $6.5 million, which is the loan amount. Additionally, you need to have 10% of the loan amount, which is $650,000, liquid post-close. And liquid doesn't necessarily mean just cash sitting in the bank, losing 8% a year. It can be money in retirement funds or other funds that you can effectively liquidate if need be. So those are some of the things that you need to be cognizant of in terms of, if I'm going to do a deal, what kind of monies do I need to be prepared to bring or represent at the closing table?
Perfect. Thank you.
Pinto.
Hi, Clive. Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. And Aaron, thanks again for hosting. Let's start off with something simple. How did you get your name?
My name?
Yes.
So it has nothing to do with I think he's 81 years old now, white guy.
He turned 90 recently, yeah.
90, music mogul. We do share a name. I really get through TSA without someone asking me about it. But other than he was a lawyer professionally before he got into the music industry in the way that he ultimately evolved to. We both used to live in New York City, so there was a lot of confusion. And I have several Clive Davis stories. The joke that I tell people is that I can get you a restaurant reservation anywhere in the country, just use my name. It actually does work. It's worked for me many times. In Beverly Hills, in New York City, it works. So that's probably more than you needed.
No, this is why I ask questions the way I ask. That's awesome. What was your most difficult pivot or hurdle to overcome on your journey from, corporate to real estate? Was it clearly you didn't have a lack of resources, so was there anything that was a hurdle, maybe mentally, maybe getting rid of a team member or something like that? Can you explain, can you talk a little bit about any hardships you experienced along the way, the most difficult one, and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I think most of us have limiting mind beliefs. I think everyone on this has probably heard or kind of experienced this in their own life. But when you're in a setting for 20 plus years and you're used to doing things a certain way, the first kind of leap of faith is, I can be an entrepreneur. Never been an entrepreneur, have no one in the family who's an entrepreneur. You've been trained, you've gone to school, and you've done the right thing, and you've gotten a good job and all that stuff. So the first leap of faith is, I can be an entrepreneur. I'm willing to leave behind this high income in pursuit of something where there's no guarantee. There is no direct deposit every 2 weeks. So that's the first leap of faith. And then the next leap of faith is, and I was talking to someone else today, I have a lot of these conversations on a daily basis, but I was telling someone who just acquired 48 units, Eddie Simonette. He's not on tonight, but many of you probably know Eddie. But I was telling him, Eddie, your next deal should be 100 units or greater. So he's only 28 years old, and he's already amassed, I think, almost 100 units. His last acquisition was 48 units. But the limiting belief that deal is too big for me, or I can't do that. I don't have that in the bank, or those types of thoughts creep into your mind, and especially when everything that you've done up until this point, where I've been investing in real estate for 20 years, it was always with my own resources. I never had to rely on a team. I showed my W-2, I showed my tax returns, and if I had the down payment, I went and I made the deal happen. Transitioning into a world where that's not going to get it done, and in order to go after deals of this size, it's not with my money. I've never raised money publicly before. So all of those are things that are obstacles that you've got to overcome. And the key is just surrounding yourself with people who have walked the path that and gone, had the journey that you are embarking on.
That's amazing. And my last question to finish off the trifecta is, can you define your impossible outside of real estate? What's something you want to accomplish, or you envisioning yourself accomplishing later on in life?
Wow.
And it doesn't have to be real estate.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's real estate, but I think real estate will be an enabler of some of the more lofty goals that I want to accomplish. But most of the loftier goals that I want to accomplish have to do with kind of giving back to my community and empowering communities like the communities that gave birth to me. So I've always had kind of an interest in developing communities, kind of holistically developing communities, not just going and putting up a building. So that's something that's kind of a lofty goal that's kind of inchoate in many respects. But I'm really big on educating people around creation of generational wealth. Next week, I'm speaking on a panel that's exactly on topic for that, where we're talking about creating generational wealth in particular for minority communities. And so increasingly, I'm finding myself educating and sharing with what might be considered disenfranchised communities or underrepresented communities. So I definitely want to do more and more of that. But I think, me serving as an example or a model to let people know that, you don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to be of a certain gender in order to be successful in this space. Although, and I'm obviously part of the Black community, so I know that less than 2% of the commercial real estate space is represented by African Americans or Blacks. So, if you let that daunting statistic stop you from pursuing opportunities, then you're going to stop in your tracks. But I think that with people seeing more and more people who come from communities similar to their own and look like them or have similar backgrounds in one respect or another, we can steadily increase that percentage from the woefully small percentage it is today.
I'm very glad I asked that. You and I are in alignment on that last part, especially. My two other partners are a Cuban and a black man. So we have this mini group within our partnership to focus on mission and values. And I think Phoenicia knows a little bit about it. So thank you so much, Clive. It's wonderful listening to you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to end this right now for this recording. I just want to tell Clive, thank you so much for coming and being part of this. And just want to let you guys know next week, Brady Hoffman will be our guest speaker. And also next week, also before that, I will have a Zoom call with Terry Hornberg about, for veterans, are talking about government contracts. We're starting the Veterans Transit Speaker Series, and we will be kicking this off by talking about government contracts. And every month we're going to have every last Thursday or Wednesday, every month, we want to have a speaker talk about a different niche to help veterans transit the military better. But that's more to come. But I just want to say thank you again, Clive, for everything. And we'll see you guys next week. God bless you.